Hello and welcome to the Cyberden. With me, your host, Jake the Voice Par. We've got a new guest right here. Please say hello to the founder of Apogee and 3D Realms, creators of classic IPs like Duke Nukem, Max Payne, and so many more, Scott Miller. Thanks for coming, mate.
Hey, glad to be here, Jake. Yeah, definitely. We also did some games like that people may or may not remember. We kind of really kicked off with Commander Keen, forming our early partnership with his software that started in 1990, and then did a couple of Commander Keen games with them. Then Wolfenstein was one of the games we did. Rise to Triad, which we just had a remaster. Some other games people might know: Raptor, Shadow Warrior, of course, the Duke games, including Duke 3D, Prey, which eventually finally came out in 2006. You mentioned Max Payne 1 and 2. So yeah, we've done quite a few, and here more recently, we released Turbo Overkill, Bread and Fred, and some other games that are out as demos. So yeah, we're still rocking and rolling.
Quite honestly, I'd be here all day if I was lifting off all the great classic games that have come out under Apogee's wing. So anyway, but let's start off at the beginning. Let's start talking about how Apogee and eventually 3D Realms came to be.
Well, I mean, Apogee got started several years before I came up with the 3D Realms label, but it really got started because in the 80s I was learning how to program, and writing games is a great way to learn how to program. So plus it's one of my interests. So I was making games, and I was also reviewing games for magazines, and I had my own computer game column in the local Dallas Morning News, which is a pretty big paper here. It's the biggest paper in Dallas, for 4 years. So I knew pretty well what a good game was, and I knew that some of my games were actually pretty good. But I sent them off to publishers and just got nothing but rejection notices. So I eventually tried releasing games online using this new thing called shareware. And my first couple of games didn't do very well. They were text adventure games, and Beyond the Titanic and Supernova, they were called. I was a big fan of the Infocom games back then. But I just came to the conclusion that, when you release a whole game online and ask for people to send you money, it's just not going to work. I mean, people already have the game in their hands. So I had these new games I was making, these cross games that were kind of designed in episodes, where I had Kingdom Across was the first one. I had Dungeons Across, Caverns Across, Temple Across. And I released the first one, Kingdom Across, as shareware. And at the end, I said, if you like this, I've got more of these. Just send me $30. I'll send you several more of these games. And that was the magic trick that worked. And that first year, I think I made about $100,000 from people just mailing money. Think how hard it is to write a check and mail someone money nowadays. It was no small commitment to do that, but made $100,000 that first year, and I realized, I think I'm onto something here. And so I was making more cross games to kind of keep up with the demand, and I realized, I can't make games fast enough. I need to find other people, other game makers out there who can sort of join my parade, and I can use this same episodic shareware release technique. And so I started beating the bushes online. And this is before the internet. So I was just going to bulletin boards and anywhere else I could. And I found this one guy, Todd Repogel, who had released a little game, and he agreed to start working with us. And his first game with us was called Caverns of Thor, a little text game. Then we worked on a game called Monuments on Mars together, and then another one called Dark Ages. And these games didn't really do all that well, but they were making decent money. Enough money to buy a new car. And then we worked on this game that at first was called Heavy Metal, and I didn't like the name. I was like, I was really becoming a fan of the way comic books always named their comic books after the lead character, like Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and all this kind of stuff. I was like, let's come up with a character name and follow the comic book model. And so I started thinking of names, and I love the name Duke because it was just a strong sounding name, Duke. And I couldn't come up with a good last name, but Todd did. He came up with Nukem. So we went with it. And the first Duke Nukem was born, and I think we released it in early 92. But Todd became the coder for Duke Nukem 1, Duke Nukem 2, Duke Nukem 3D. The guy was just amazing. He was just a nonstop, amazing, super talented coder and also game designer. And so that's how I found him. And, I also found another team who was working at a company called Softdisk, which back then there was these magazines on disc. There was Big Blue Disc, Softdisk, I think one called Micro something, and they would just release these monthly disc magazines that were for the PC and also included games and utility programs on there. And at Softdisk, I liked this one game that this one coder had made called Dangerous Dave. And so I reached out to him, finally got a hold of him, and his name was John Romero. And, that became the start of the whole partnership we had at the beginning with id Software. And they had just developed this new pixel perfect side scrolling engine. And I immediately fell in love with it and said, look, let's work on this. And they were kind of like disbelieving that you could release games freely and make money off it. Even though I was telling them how much I was making with Cross at the time, and we had other projects in development. Yeah, and so they said, well, put up or shut up, and they said, we want $2,000 to make you a game, which was more than they would have made, more than they were making at Softdisk for a game. So I was like, yeah, sure. And so they sent me this single page that was like a 1 or 2 paragraph description of this game called Commander Keen that I think Tom Hall had quickly written up. And I immediately said, sold, let's do it. Sent them an agreement, and boom, it was off to the races. And like 3 or 4 months later, we released Commander Keen. I think December 20th of 1990 is when the game came out, I think. And I had a ski trip planned for over Christmas break with a bunch of friends. And so right after releasing that game, I left on a ski trip, and I left my answering machine on, which is where people could call in to place orders, which not a lot of people were doing. Most people were still writing us checks. So I didn't expect really much in the way of orders coming in that were phone calls. But I get back from the ski trip, and there was like 50 messages. The tape was full, people calling in to order. My mailbox was completely overflowing with letters, and so it was like, boom, Commander Keen just took things to a whole new level for us. I think even though the game came out very late in December, I think I sent id Software a check for $12,000 just for that month. And then like the next month in January, I sent them a check for like $25,000, and it just kept growing just for this little game, Commander Keen. So they were immediately like totally sold on it, and they quit Softdisk completely and dedicated all their time to, being id Software at that point. So I forget what your question was, but that's kind of how things got started. Yeah.
I think you've answered about 2 or 3 of my potential questions all in one go there, so I'm going to have to adapt on the fly. Bit of a double question. So roughly how much did Commander Keen, did you have like a rough estimate as to the sales of Commander Keen? And also, alongside Duke Nukem 1 and 2, how successful were they, especially in terms of sales?
I don't remember exact numbers for any of these games back then. I really never paid attention to it because we were honestly making so much money that we had money to spare, and we couldn't make games fast enough. I mean, we were just focused on, back then it really wasn't, we were thinking really about the money when we were trying to, we were growing the company, but it just took off so magically well for us that, we never did have to like plan budgets out or anything. It was just like, yeah, we love this game. Let's throw whatever money it takes to make it at it and get it done. So, but I would say that Commander Keen, I'm sure it made at least talking gross, this is before we split it up between Apogee and id. And back then we split things up, I think, around 50-50. I'm sure it made at least $1 million, if not more. And Duke Nukem 1, I think, made double that. Duke Nukem 1 did really, really well. And then for Wolfenstein 3D, which came out in 92, that had to have made at least $10 million. Yeah, so that's when, the people at id Software, they were buying all their Ferraris and stuff.
On the topic of Wolfenstein, what actually made you realize the potential of first-person shooters? And did you think that, Wolfenstein 3D by id Software, did you think that was going to be a hit, like, the first time you saw it?
Yes. So by the time that Wolfenstein 3D got started, id Software had moved to Dallas, and they were working out of some apartments that were about 2 miles from where I lived, and where the Apogee offices were. I was visiting them all the time, and while they were working on the second Commander Keen trilogy and so on, I would hang out with them at their apartments, talk to them about game ideas and just stuff like that. And I would also see what they were working on, because they were still doing some games for Softisk. They still had this agreement with Softisk they had to fulfill, where they had to do 2 or 3 more games for Softisk. And John was experimenting with these 3D engines, like Hover Tank and Catacombs 3D. And I was looking at this and I was like, guys, we have to do something with this engine for shareware, because this could be huge. This is, and they agreed with me. I mean, it was like they knew they were onto something. So, during Wolf's development, I had the idea of, let's not do 3 episodes, let's do 6 episodes, because it didn't really take that long to make a level. It took like a full day or so to make a level. And John Romero and Tom Hall were both making levels. And I was like, look, guys, if we could sell 6 episodes, that would give us like this upsell option to where, people could buy the first 3 episodes for $35 or get 6 episodes for $50. And they agreed to do it. And it turns out like 85 to 90% of our sales was for all 6 episodes. So we were getting $50 a shot. Plus, we even had a hint manual that about half the people ordered. And that was an extra $10. So that brought the total to $60 to get the whole, deluxe package, 6 episodes plus the hint manual. At least 50% of the people were getting the hint manual too. So it was just so obvious back then that, yeah, we were really onto something with this game, because I'm always attracted to things that are super innovative, have never been seen before, are sort of groundbreaking. And when I see something like that, really anyone in my shoes back then, I think, would have agreed. This is going to be a big hit. Let's put everything we can into this, because this is going to dwarf anything we've done previously. It's really going to set the world on fire, and it did.
So what can you say about some of the other Wolfenstein-esque shooters that were released under Apogee's wing? So basically, like the Blake Stone series, Rise of the Triad Dark War, of course that had the shareware episode alongside, and an expansion pack as well. So how well did all of these titles fare?
Well, very soon after Wolfenstein came out and the engine was basically done, I was talking to id Software about, let's leverage this engine and find another team that can make a game with it. And they actually knew the guys who did Blake Stone, who called themselves JM Productions. JM stands for Jim and Mike, the two main guys. So this was a team that id Software knew, and we reached out to them, and they totally agreed to make a game using the Wolf engine. And the idea was for that game to be done within like 8 months. It ended up taking a lot longer, I think more like 18 months. So when it finally came out, it was kind of like behind the curve on things. Otherwise, I think Blake Stone would have done a lot better. In fact, when it finally came out, I think it was very close to when Doom was released. And, obviously Doom crushes anything that's released against it. So Blake Stone didn't really sell that well. I think we ended up selling maybe $1 million worth. So it was good. It was profitable for sure, but it could have done a lot better had it come out much sooner. But I think that when Jim and Mike, Jam Productions, got the engine, their ambition got the best of them, and they really sort of wanted to make a game that was far more innovative than even Wolfenstein was. So they had, floor and ceiling textures, revisiting levels, and just all, some RPG elements, all kinds of stuff. Had they done something that was a little simpler, it would have come out, at least 10 months earlier and done much, much better for them. But anyway, live and learn type of thing. And for us, we also, and also back then, after Spirit Destiny came out, and I knew that id Software was working on the Doom engine, I also approached it and said, look, I think there's still a lot more to be squeezed out of the Wolf franchise. So why don't you let us take the engine and develop a game? And I had this game idea where it was called Wolfenstein 3D Rise of the Triad, where the whole story was that, Hitler was not really the main guy. It was this triad, and Hitler was more like their puppet. And so now you got to go in and finish off the triad. And id Software agreed. And so the first 6 months of production on Rise of the Triad, it was actually Wolfenstein 3D Rise of the Triad. And then as our game got further along, I think that they got nervous about it being released too close to Doom. And so they decided to remove the Wolfenstein license from us. And we kept the game going as Rise of the Triad. And so that's what eventually got released. And it did really well because it was released also at retail at the same time, and the retail market for the game did really well. So I don't remember what it made, but it was a pretty good hit for us. But we never did any sequels. We did like expansion packs and stuff, but we never did any sequels because by that time we had 4 games being developed using our newest engine, the Build engine. We had Duke Nukem 3D, Shadow Warrior, Blood, and a game called Ruins, which eventually got released as Power Slave. So we had these 4 games underway, and so we were pretty excited about that because that was Doom equal or better technology, and that's where we wanted to put our focus.
We're going to be touching a bit more on those titles you just mentioned there in a moment. Of course, we can't go any further without mentioning, of course, Duke Nukem 3D, absolute major hit on the gaming scene. So did you guys basically see a lot of potential in the Build engine when it was in the works with by Kevin Silverman? And basically, what was the overarching goal with this title?
Well, we saw what Ken was doing with his Ken Labyrinth engine, and it's funny that he sent that game to us and wanted us to publish the game, and we rejected it. But we told him, look, we really love your talent. We'd love to work with you. We just don't want to publish this game. And he ended up working a deal with Epic. I think Epic published that game. But Epic didn't necessarily want to work with Ken as an engine developer because I think Tim Sweeney and James Schmaltz over there, they were working on their Unreal Engine at the time. So they didn't need Ken. So Ken ended up coming back to us and saying, hey, I've got this start to a new engine that will compete with its Doom engine. And we took a look at that and we go, yeah, you're definitely onto something here. Let's work a deal to where you develop the engine for us and we pay you a license fee. And we said, we'll get at least 2 or 3 games started with your engine and you're going to make a lot of money that way. And we ended up getting 4 games started. And by that time, we had released Duke 1 and Duke Nukem 2. And so it was just obvious to go with Duke Nukem 3D and that engine. So that was kind of a no-brainer. But at the time, we had no idea it was going to be a big hit. And then the guys who we had worked on with previously who had done games for us, like Jim Norwood had done a game for us called Biomenace. And Frank Madden had done a game for us called Monster Bash. And they teamed up to work on the Build engine to make the game called Shadow Warrior, which we eventually brought in-house. And then there was a team in California run by Nick Newhard, and he proposed the idea of doing a game called Blood. So we signed that game up. But that game eventually, we sold the rights to Monolith about 10 or 12 months into production, because by that time we realized we had too much on our plate with our other Build engine games, and we couldn't really do all 4. So We let the guys who were doing Ruins, we said, look, we're just going to convert you guys into a license fee for the engine, and you can find another publisher. With Blood, we sold the rights, and we kept Shadow Warrior and Duke Nukem 3D. So yeah, and Duke Nukem 3D, you know, as it was being developed, Ken kept improving the engine, so we kept adding new features to the game. You know, the sloped walls, some voxel stuff, rooms over room type stuff, portal effects. Although they weren't really portals, you don't see them in the game as portals like in Prey, but it allowed you to sort of warp around and do some interesting things that kind of like break the rules of geometry. But so yeah, that game turned out to be, you know, when it finally released, you know, we once again we knew that we had something really special on our hands, and you know, it released to the world and did super well. It did better than even our expectations. So yeah, and also with that game, you know, by that time Doom had been released, Doom 2 had been released. We knew Quake was coming, so we didn't want to really make a Doom clone. You know, we really thought hard about ways to make Duke Nukem different, you know, with realistic environments, a talking character, lots of humor, lots of interactivity. All this kind of stuff was put in there to make sure that we weren't just another like Doom clone. There you go.
Quickly sidelining a bit on Shadow Warrior. So why is it that you decided to, yeah, of course you mentioned about selling off Ruins and Blood, but you decided to still keep Shadow Warrior with the developers. Why so? What was like the aim with Shadow Warrior? Did you think it was going to be like, I don't know, the next Duke Nukem, the next bigger, better kind of build engine powered Duke game? Of course, with a Asian twist.
Yeah, I mean, we had worked with those authors going back to nearly the start. For instance, Frank Madden also had started with us back in 1991 with a game called Crystal Caves. Then he did Monster Bash. So, you know, we were just really good friends with Frank. We were also really good friends with Jim Norwood. Jim Norwood actually was brought in on the very first Duke Nukem, and he did a lot of the background art that you see in Duke Nukem, because Duke Nukem has like a parallaxing background. Well, Jim did all the background art for all the parallaxing scenes in the game. So we just had a long history with those authors, and we didn't want to separate from them. So we definitely kept Shadowware. You know, we also wanted to keep Blood, but it was just too much for us. And Jace Hall from Monolith visited our offices and made us a really good deal to acquire the rights to Blood. So we just felt like it was the best thing for Apogee at the time, because we had a lot on our plate. And you know, by that time, we realized that making these build engine games was a lot more work than we realized, you know, when we first started them. So it was you know, tough to lose the rights to Blood. You know, I mean, looking back, I wish we could have found a way to keep that game, but that's how it goes. So we ended up just keeping 2 of those games, and Duke obviously did extremely well, and Shadow Warrior did pretty well. It came out like a year and a half later, I think, 15 months later, and you know, it did really well. And you know, I'm glad to see that Devolver has taken over the IP and continues that IP, you know, to this day. So
what happened to those Shadow Warrior expansion packs? Sunstorm Interactive with the, I'm trying to remember the name, Wanton Destruction, Twin Dragon, and also a third one called Deadly Kiss. That ended up getting leaked on the internet, funnily enough. So what exactly happened to these sorts of add-ons? Were they just cancelled because of supposed not enough sales, or was there maybe more behind the scenes going on?
I wish I knew the exact story. I think those expansion packs were kind of being driven by our publisher, GT Interactive Software, at the time. They did a lot of the Duke Nukem ones, like Life's a Beach and the Christmas one. Can't remember the name, but they were kind of the ones who were like, look, we have this great IP here. Let's really capitalize on it and get expansion packs out there and stuff. So they were the ones that had separate teams, small teams that they had found, and were sort of running the show. And then they would send us, you know, in development builds of what they were doing for us to make comments on. So I think it was them. If there was anything canceled, it would have been them that did it. And you know, they probably just saw that after Shadow Warrior was released, it wasn't going to be a Duke Nukem sized hit, so they didn't want to really spend more money on expansion packs. That's kind of my guess on how things went.
Can you tell us some more about Duke Nukem's, Duke's popularity with the franchise? And, of course, you mentioned about GT saying, let's get some more add-ons out, but there's also, the spin-off titles. There was a music album, action figures, far more. What can you tell us about all of this merch surrounding Duke's increasing popularity?
Well, a lot of that was again, GTIS, our publisher, who was like coming to us with ideas and saying, look, we can do these expansions. We can find teams to make console versions of Duke. And we had basically a rule on the console versions. We wanted to keep the first person perspective sort of exclusive to the games we were doing. So we told GT, look, if you want to make console versions, then do it third person like Tomb Raider does, and we'll see Duke from the back. That way, there's like a distinction. And I think their very first pitch to us for Time to Kill, which was the first console version, I remember seeing the words Duke Raider on the top of their pitch. And the whole idea was, look, Tomb Raider's big. Let's do a version of Duke that's in third person, and just make it a Duke game, but in third person. So it made sense to us, so we signed off on it. And then they pitched, after that game came out, they wanted to do a sequel, Planet of the or Land of the Babes. We wanted to call it Planet of the Babes, but Fox saw that and they said it's too close to Planet of the Apes. So they made us back off, and we ended up calling it Land of the Babes. Then there was 0 Hour. So yeah, a lot of that was driven by our publisher just wanting to really capitalize on the IP and thinking big picture. And me and George at Apogee / 3D Realms, we loved their enthusiasm for it. So we were always like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And but we were always like, but we need to have the quality control over it, because we just don't want to be pushing out crap. We want to make sure that we get to play test things as they're being developed, provide comments, feedback, all that kind of stuff. And also during this time, we did with A-Rush Interactive, we did Duke Nukem Manhattan Project, which was like a side scroller but in a 3D engine. That happened during that time too. Yeah, so yeah, we had a lot going on.
As a bit of an off-the-cuff improvised question that comes to mind, what would you say, in your personal opinion, perhaps your favourite Duke moment, or maybe probably the most badass Duke moment that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, but for me, I'd have to go with when Duke Nukem pulls through with his promise to rip off the alien's head and take a dump down his neck. So what the deal there was, we had a producer at the time, Greg Malone, who was really helping out with we brought him on to work with us to get Duke 3D out the door, to help manage the project. And we had Duke saying this line at the beginning of that fight, I'm gonna rip off your neck and shit down I'm gonna rip off your head and shit down your neck. And I heard that line, and I was in the office with Greg Malone, and I said, we need to make Duke actually do that. Let's actually do an animation and follow through. That should not just be a throwaway line. That should be something that he really does. And Greg's like, really? You think we can show that? And I said, I don't care if we can or not. This is what we're all about, is doing things that are going to surprise people. So Chuck Jones, he drew up a bunch of like concepts, and which is exactly Duke ripping off the head, sitting on the guy's neck, and then Chuck had the idea of Duke opening up like a newspaper and sitting there and whistling his own tune, the Duke theme song. So it just worked out perfectly. And then, from there, Chuck actually animated the whole scene. And to me, that's just like perfect Duke right there, that he would do something like that.
Now let's talk about the title that I'm sure many have probably asked you about, Duke Nukem Forever. So, of course, the story's been passed around many times. You've definitely been on social media kind of telling about nuggets of the story, but again, just for Outland Sign, what can you tell us about the lengthy development process for Duke Nukem Forever?
Well, I think most people know it got started where we licensed the Quake engine, and we got about 6 months into development of that. And I think at the first E3 we showed Duke Nukem Forever, it was in the Quake engine. But we were really struggling with that engine to do some of the things we wanted to do. And so I reached out to Tim Sweeney and said, we might be thinking about using a different engine. And I even reached out to Monolith because they had an engine. What was it called? Lithtech, I think, at the time. And Tim Sweeney, it's like within a few days, Tim Sweeney and Mark Rain, I think one other person from Epic, were on a plane, and they were down at the Apogee offices, and they were showing us their engine, all the effects, the tools, really talking it up. And quite frankly, they sold us. And so we switched engines, and that was a bit of a setback because we had to basically redo all kinds of assets and everything. And at that time, George had really become the project manager for Duke Nukem Forever, and I was kind of focused on Max Payne and still on Prey, and Duke Nukem Manhattan project was a big focus of mine. And I became more focused on our external projects. And George was basically handling Duke Nukem Forever. And and as the first couple of years went on, I noticed that George was, he would play the newest game that was out there, and like a Half-Life or something, and get all enamored with it and be like, we can't release Duke Nukem Forever and have it look behind the times, so we need to, whatever the best is that's on the market, we need to at least match that. So we just kept beefing up the Unreal Engine to do things that it really wasn't designed to do, and it took forever. And so the game just fell behind. And I remember around 2004, 2005, telling George, look, we're just undermanned. We don't have people. This project has turned into a money pit for us. And I had secretly talked to our publisher, Take-Two Interactive, and also James Schmaltz at Digital Extremes. This is way before they had done Warframe. And kind of gotten the okay from both of them to let Digital Extremes kind of take over the project, because they had a much bigger staff. And James was saying, yeah, we can get this game done like within a year and a half, no problem. And Take-Two would have taken over the budget for it and so on. But George didn't like the idea, so that never ended up happening. I think that if we would have done that, then the company would be in a much different state than it turned out to be, and the game would have come out, I think, would have been really good, and we'd be looking at Duke Nukem 6 or 7 by now. But that didn't happen, and we ended up working on the game for far too long. It just kept dragging on. It was super frustrating to me. It was super frustrating to a lot of people on the team, and I really, looking back, I don't understand how that happened, but it ended up happening. And we reached a point to where we weren't willing to fund the game anymore. Take-Two said they were going to continue to fund it, but then they lost, understandably, they lost faith in our ability to finish it. So we just ended up dropping the game, and Gearbox ended up buying the IP from us. They said they would finish it, and it took them a year to finish it up and release it. But yeah, that was kind of the end of Duke for us.
What were your thoughts on the final product that was released in 2011? What do you kind of think about that? And I don't know if you checked out the DLCs that came out as well, but would love to hear your thoughts nonetheless.
Well, I know the team Triptych finished Duke. Those guys, were part of Duke Nukem Forever, and they worked their butts off to somehow take the bits and pieces that were laying around on hard drives and somehow make a game out of it. And frankly, I don't know how they did it. But at the same time, when we sold the IP to Gearbox, I was expecting them to put at least 10 to 15 of their people also on the project to really kind of fill out the team like it needed to be filled out and make the game, truly a AAA top-notch, 90 plus scoring game. And that didn't seem to happen. I don't really know what happened, but it just seemed to me like they let Triptych finish the game, and Triptych was an undersized team. They were doing their very best, but they were an undersized team, and they could have definitely used a lot more help to make the game what it should have been when it was released. So I played the game, and there was a lot in there that disappointed me. But at the same time, like I said, it's just a miracle that it came out with such a small team putting it together. So on one hand, I'm super impressed by what Triptych did. On the other hand, I realized they were way over their heads and with that project, and they didn't, I don't think, get all the support they needed.
What are your thoughts on the 2001 build of Duke Nukem Forever being leaked, and also, the dedicated fans that were trying to mod it, patch it up, etc.? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm happy to see these leaks happen, quite frankly. I don't think they hurt anyone. I think they give people a look, stages of development and so on, and see what we were thinking back then. So I think they help keep the IP alive and in the public's eye. So for me, it's a win. Even if we still own the Duke IP, I would still see it as a win because it's something that still fuels fans' interest, and I like to see that fans are putting effort into it to try and make that version of the game playable. I hope that eventually happens. From what I've seen so far, they're really doing a pretty good job. But it's a big project for sure.
In your own personal opinion, what would you consider like an ideal follow-up to a Duke Nukem game? And can you probably tell us about what some people aren't doing right with Duke's personality as well? Because I've noticed that you've kind of like commented on that as well. I'd love to hear your inputs on how would, I don't know, any developer of your choice, what game would they make and how should they characterize Duke?
Yeah, Duke is a very tough character to get right. And, people think that Duke's all about him being funny, but, Duke never says anything funny on purpose. It's more about his character, his actions and just the way he phrases things. But he's never like trying to be a comedian or saying anything like trying to be funny, really. And it's just really hard to get Duke right. Like I know that when Gearbox was working on a license that we gave them for a game called Duke Nukem Begins, I know that some of the early stuff they came up with for Duke, had me cringing, quite honestly, because it just wasn't the Duke that we had created. It was some other comedian style Duke doing goofy things. And then we heard from we've recently heard some of the voice lines from Duke Nukem Reloaded, and those were super cringeworthy. And, so it's just, I just have little faith that another company is going to get Duke right, honestly, because it's such a fine line to get him right. Every company, it's just like, when other companies take over IPs, they just don't seem to necessarily get it right. Like we haven't really been all that impressed with like what Disney's done with Star Wars. They completely, in my opinion, mishandled the Luke Skywalker character in the sequel trilogy. Even the actor himself has said that. So unless you really were involved with creating the character and building the character to what it was during its glory times, I just have little faith, honestly. But that's not saying I don't want to see someone at least try, because I would love to see a great Duke game come out and play it myself without having been involved with the development, and then everything will be a surprise to me for the first time. So I would love for that experience to happen. But I just have my doubts that if we do see another Duke game, that it's going to be the Duke Nukem that we remember from Duke Nukem 3D.
Now let's get talking about Prey. What was the overarching goal of this title, and how did the original unreleased version differ from the final product?
Probably the biggest difference is that in the 90s version, we actually had a portal gun. And, to this day, it kills me that we didn't keep that idea for the Prey that was finally released. It was part of the original design for the game. It just, for some reason, it didn't make it into the Prey that was released in 2006. Had we had that feature in there, I think that game would have even been a bigger success, and we would probably be seeing more sequels of it. But what Human Head did with Prey, though, was really, in my opinion, amazing. They, for the most part, they knocked it out of the park. With all the other cool stuff they added. Like, it was their idea to have the gravity walls that you could walk on, the gravity reversing effects, and so on. That was all from them. And their artwork was just amazing. What they did with the Doom 3 engine, and somehow they did put the portals in that engine, which was no small feat. And it just was blowing me away. Some of the scenes in that game, like where you could like go into this one room and now you're small and you're walking around on that little asteroid object and you can walk around it and the gravity keeps you oriented correctly and so on. I mean, some of the stuff they had in that game was just really jaw-dropping. There's some places where levels kind of like form themselves like right in front of you. Just really cool effects. So, I'm super happy with Prey that came out in 2006, but it's always bugged me that we didn't get that portal gun in there like we had back in the original versions of Prey that we were working on internally, because I think that portal gun would have been the final touch that game needed to really carry it over the top.
And I believe I heard from a couple of sources that you were actually getting the German industrial metal band KMFDM for the soundtrack. Is that true?
Yes, we had them back originally. So that was we had our project director back then, Paul Skidema. He was the one that reached out to them and got them interested. And they had done, I want to say, 6 or 8 tracks for us already. And I've tried to locate those tracks. Paul can't find them. And I just don't know where they are, but I'd love to hear those tracks because they were actually really good. I've even reached out to the band to see if they have copies of them, but I have not heard back from them. So they're ignoring my DMs or whatever. But I would certainly love to be able to release those tracks online for people to hear, because if I remember right, they were actually pretty cool.
What other plans did you have for the Prey franchise? Because, of course, I remember the 2006 Prey had the build-up to a potential sequel with the cliffhanger ending, and I did see that you shared a design document for a Prey movie as well. So, what can you say?
Yeah, we definitely wanted to keep that world expanding. The idea from the beginning was always that Tommy's first adventure on Earth would really be his only adventure on Earth. And from then on, his adventures would be out as like sort of a bounty hunter for hire, because he had made such an amazing reputation by defeating this sphere entity that had gone around, devouring and defeating, just countless planets. And here's this one guy who took it down. And so now everyone's like, well, if there's any problem in the universe with, bad guys or whatever, the guy to call would be this guy, Tommy, because look what he's already done. So he would always sort of, my idea was, he would always remain like a no one on Earth. While he was on Earth walking around, whatever, no one would ever know that he's this galactically known legendary sort of hero. And so every game would be, another adventure that just once again builds up his galactic status as this guy who can seem to do the impossible. And he was going to continue to grow with this sort of Cherokee-based spiritual powers also, for each game. That was always going to be an ongoing process for him. But Prey 2, we were also going to introduce other characters, like this character, Killian. So we were really, the idea was we need to build up this whole suite of characters. We need to move away from games that just had this lone hero concept. And we need to start thinking more like a TV show where you have a whole bunch of characters, almost like, or more like the Avengers. You have a bunch of different characters, and no one's really the top star. Tommy might be the top star. He might be like the Iron Man of our version of Avengers, but other characters are also super important and can have games where they're sort of the main star. So that's really where we were going with Prey 2, was we were going to not focus necessarily on Tommy, even though he's going to be in the game. We were going to introduce another character who was going to be another major part of the suite of characters. And we were going to introduce not just him, but some other characters. And by the third or fourth game, we would have, hopefully 6 to 8 characters that are part of this group that that then can work together, and they can either have their own separate style games or combined story games. And so, yeah, that's the direction we were going with that.
Speaking of Tommy as a protagonist, I remember how he was kind of characterized. Instead of being, big macho hero like Duke Nukem, he was much more of a kind of a hesitant hero. Like, he had his own reasons for just trying to fight his way through all the aliens in his way, but of course eventually grew into the shoes and kind of like eventually accepted his role as, okay, I guess I'm the only person who can really save the planet here and put these bad guys down. So where did that idea kind of like actually stem from?
I mean, that's 100% classical, the hero's journey plotting right there. You've got your reluctant hero at the beginning who then gets pushed into the adventure. The grandfather is the mentor character, and sort of the main trigger for Tommy was the death of his girlfriend, and that's when he realized he needs to fully embrace his heritage, go get the final training that his grandfather is offering him, and then come back and just totally kick ass. So it's just classical plotting. I mean, we do all sorts of things with these games. The game also starts off with an idea called undeserved misfortune, and we did this with Max Payne too. So what undeserved misfortune is, and you'll see this in tons of movies once you understand what's going on, it's when your main character has something bad happen to him or her that was totally undeserved, puts your character in a very bad place, and now you're rooting for that character to fight their way back and get the justice they deserve, and so on. So that's exactly how Max Payne starts. We basically killed off his family to create that undeserved misfortune and put Max in that very bad place to where he has to fight his way back. Well, with Tommy, we do the same thing, because his grandfather gets killed very early in the game. His reservations are ripped away. He loses his girlfriend; she's taken away. So that creates empathy, and you want to root for the character when these sort of things happen. And like I said, once you kind of see this, once you understand this principle, you'll see it in tons of movies. Even like in Star Wars, it's not until Luke's family is killed that Luke realizes he needs to accept the call to adventure. So yeah, it's just a very basic storytelling technique, but these things are in so many movies and stories because they work, and we're not above using them.
Of course, you mentioned about Max Payne. Let's move on to that now. So again, what was the overall goal with this one, and what persuaded you guys to let Remedy Entertainment develop that one while 3D Realms remained in the producer role?
We had worked with Remedy already on a game called Death Rally, and that relationship went super well. We really liked working with each other. So I said, look, guys, come to us with a pitch for your next game, and let's talk it through to see if we can work together again. And they actually came to us with 3 different pitches, and they had a space game that was would have come out a little bit like Homeworld. They had a racing game, and they had a game called Dark Justice, I believe, where it was a top-down detective game, kind of like Interplay's game Loadout, where you're kind of watching a detective from like a bird's eye view, go through various rooms and shoot bad guys and stuff, and solve puzzles and so on. And they actually wanted to do all 3 games. And I said, look, guys, you're not big enough yet to even think about doing 3 games. You need to focus just on 1 game, and let's do it right. Let's do it as best we can. And I said, really, the game that impresses me the most here is this detective game, but I said, I don't like it being top down. We need to make it full 3D. I told them that we need to do like what we're doing with Duke Nukem Forever at the time and make it completely photo source textures. That way it gives it a very unique and very realistic look. And yeah, so I gave them some pillars, and they came back like a month and a half later with a new design doc just for this game. And we didn't have a name for it really, but I told them that I want to do like we did with Duke Nukem and name it after the main character. So we started brainstorming names and came up with the name Max Payne eventually. And so yeah, it was just a matter of, we had worked together on Death Rally. The relationship went really well. Let's find another project to work on. Once we got the sort of the Max Payne project idea nailed down, we agreed to fund their project. We also co-owned it 50-50 with them. And I remember telling the guys like very early on, before really anything had started, any code had been written yet, I said, if we do this right, then we're going to make a game that stands out with another super solid character, a great story. And it wouldn't surprise me, we don't have Hollywood coming to us, knocking at our door to make a movie out of this game. And that's exactly what happened too. Sadly, the movie wasn't very good, but it did show that we made a game that even caught Hollywood's attention.
So with Max Payne, what was the inspiration for a more gritty, noir-inspired protagonist? And of course, the more realistic but still, very gloomy, depressing world. Not to mention, ideas like bullet time, which I believe you came up with that idea.
It was Sam Lake and Remedy who had the idea to do it like as a film noir style story. And we agreed that we wanted Max Payne to be different than Duke Nukem. So let's not make him look, all beefy. His skills are in different areas. He doesn't need to be this great fighter. He's more of a gun guy. And so he doesn't need to be, this beefy guy that can carry huge weapons and stuff like that and kick down doors, stuff like that. So, we purposely made Sam more of an everyman style hero. And believe it or not, the bullet time idea didn't come along until probably 14 to 16 months into development. So we knew that we wanted to make the game sort of John Woo style. And, somewhere like 14 to 15 or whatever, 16 months into development, I was at Remedy and I had visited them in Finland, and they were showing me some of the new technology in the game, including this slow motion technology, to where like you would run into a room, there'd be like 3 bad guys, you'd shoot the first 2, and then when you shot the last one, the character would die in slow motion. So when you finished off a room, the last character you killed would die in this really cool slow motion thing, and they'd have the camera spin around the dying character. And it was very John Woo-ish. And I was like, guys, this is completely amazing. It just, it was so cool. But I said, this is too cool just to be a cool cinematic little touch here. We need to find a way to make this part of gameplay. And so I got back to the United States like a few days later, and it occurred to me that we need to have Max be able to activate this slow motion time and have him shoot at enemies. But I was thinking, well, if Max is in slow motion and the enemies are in slow motion, what really is Max's advantage? Because you're both equal at that point. So what is the advantage of both Max and the enemies are in slow motion? There wasn't really an advantage, unless this is really the key insight that makes bullet time work, unless Max is able to move his gun in real time and aim in real time. So that was like the magic insight that makes bullet time cool, is that not only can Max activate bullet time and go into slow motion, but he has the advantage because he can aim in real time. The aiming isn't slowed down by the slow motion. So he can like boom, 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 pick off 3 guys while going in slow motion. So once they got that into the game, it just was like, holy damn, this is like, now the game's at a whole new level. This is the feature in the game. And we still didn't have a name for it. And later that year, we met at E3 And I think it was E3 2000. And I walked up to one of the lead designers and I said, I've got the perfect name. I said, let's call it Bullet Time. Because what was cool about going into Bullet Time is that you could see the bullets in slow motion. And so it was like, yeah, Bullet Time, it makes sense. And this is, I promise you, this is before we had heard anything about the Matrix calling their effect Bullet Time. In fact, I think we had seen the Matrix, but after we had come up with the slow motion idea, but we had seen the Matrix along the way, and they don't use the term bullet time in the movie. So for me, it was a whole new phrase. But so a lot of people think that we stole it from Matrix, but we didn't.
Would you say that you guys were more hands-on with the sequel, Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne, and how did working on this one, alongside Remedy, of course, compare to before?
Well, we were definitely super hands-on with the first game. I was getting builds from them almost weekly and making long lists of comments to send to them, and just so we were definitely hands-on for the first. And really, for the second one, it was the same way. So I had the idea of selling the IP while we were starting the second game, and I told Remedy, I said, I think, with this game being at the peak, it's just doing so well. I think we can get just a ton of money from Rockstar or Take-Two, our publisher at the time. And Microsoft at the time was also interested in the game. So I knew I could kind of create a little bit of a bidding war. So we just got this amazing deal from Take-Two to buy the IP. And Remedy was completely on board with the idea of doing that too, because the money was just too good to pass up. And so, but we stayed totally involved, even though this happened just a few months into the development of Max Payne 2. My company, Apogee, we still stayed fully involved with the design of Max 2 and providing feedback. We were getting builds constantly and so on. So yeah, we were definitely deeply involved with the design of both games.
What were your thoughts on Rockstar's Max Payne 3? And do you still think that there's room for more in the series? Or do you think it's had a good run, but I don't know, maybe there isn't much more for Max?
Well, confession time, I've never actually played Max 3. I bought it online, and they had some sort of copy protection system that wouldn't allow me to play the game. I was basically, well, screw you, you've got my money, and I don't get to play your game, and that's the end of that. I'm not even going to bother anymore. So I never even tried to get their game again. I wasn't going to pay for it again. Yeah, so I feel like they totally screwed me over with that. So I never tried to play Max Payne 3 again. But I've seen plenty of videos and stuff about it. I kind of get the gist of it. It's definitely not the direction that, had it still been an Apogee Remedy collaboration, definitely not the direction I would have taken with the game. We kind of had a plan of doing 4 Max Payne games, each based on a season. So the Fall of Max Payne also refers to the fall season. And we were going to do sort of a seasonal theme Max Payne game for 4 different games. And I've heard, a lot of people say that Max Payne 3 is a great game. I don't know how it ends. I don't know what state Max Payne is in during the end of the game. I don't know if they kind of closed off things to where there's really no need for more Max Payne games. But, from my point of view, I think that, Max Payne could have continued even beyond the 4 games that we originally had planned.
After 3D Realms' buyout, I believe you were something of a creative consultant on a few titles. So what exactly did this entail exactly? And why did you decide to step back to revitalizing Apogee as, certainly as a publisher?
Yeah, when we sold the 3D Realms label to an investor in Denmark, I was still thinking, there's still a lot of life in this. Let's see if we can't work together to sort of revive 3D Realms and make it, get it back on its feet, so to speak, and so on. So, I was visiting Denmark quite often. I was meeting with the investor, Mike Nielsen, with his partner, Fred Schreiber. And so, yeah, we were working on projects together, that they, I talked them into to doing a Bombshell game, but I did not like the Bombshell game they originally made. That was not the direction I was proposing for them, and that first Bombshell game came out and it's pretty forgettable. But luckily there was another team, Void Point, who wanted to do another Bombshell game using the build engine, because some of the guys on that team were super familiar with the build engine. They had written updates to the code. They had worked with Ken Silverman to make it better, give it more features, to make it still work on modern equipment. So they got the rights to do another Bombshell game using that engine, and that came out, and that turned out to be just amazing. So that became Iron Fury, and I think they're about to release a sequel to that called Aftershock. But but I kept working with 3D Realms and helped them sign the Wrath project. And in fact, the developer, his name is Jeremiah Fox, who goes by Killpixel. He now works with Apogee on projects as a producer. So he hasn't worked on Wrath, I don't think, in several years now. I think 3D Realms bought the rights from him at some point and decided to continue making the game on their own. So I was involved with the Wrath a little bit. I was involved with Graven. I helped write the initial story for Graven and came up with some of the key pillars for the game. When you play Graven, it's very foggy, and that was one of the things I said, to really set Graven apart, let's have fog everywhere. Let's make it a very foggy game, like a ground level fog type of thing, and a bunch of other ideas. And I'm actually very curious when that game comes out, if I'm even going to be in the credits, because I know initially I was in the credits, but it's going to be very interesting to see if I'm in the credits or if they're going to cut me out. But and the same thing with Phantom Fury. The whole key story sort of MacGuffin in that game all came from me. The fact that Manhattan Project's involved and some other things, the ending of the game, the thing that Shelley's looking for, all those elements in the game came from me. So that's another game I'm curious to see if I'm in the credits for. But so what happened was, I was working with 3D Realms on their projects, and when they got bought by Embracer, I was not asked to continue my involvement. So I basically was on my own. It was like, well, I guess I'll relaunch Apogee then. And I got together with my partner, longtime partner, Terry Nagy. He used to work for Apogee back in the 90s. And we kicked off the company and relaunched it. And but basically it was because they basically didn't want me to continue to work with 3D Realms. So I was like, well, okay, I'll start my own company back up.
Tell us about some of the titles that Apogee has, of course, taken under its wing at the moment. Some of the biggest titles are clearly like Bread and Fred and Turbo Overkill. Why did you decide to sign these up, and what are your thoughts on the success of these titles, and why there is such big sellers and doing great with reviewers and fans alike?
Yeah, we have, I think, 11 or 12 titles currently. We still have a couple more we're going to announce before the end of the year. And we just announced a game called Wizardom. We just announced Vexlands fairly recently. But yeah, we got two big ones still to announce. But with Apogee, we're just looking for games that are just basically fun. And it doesn't matter really what genre they're in. So, we're not going to be like an FPS company, even though we have a couple of FPSs. With Turbo Overkill, we have one called Exercide, and now we have Wizardom. Those are basically FPS style games, but all the rest are kind of like all over the map. But we're just basically looking for games that are really high quality, really well made, have a real high fun factor, are super innovative in some way, and are games that we are interested in playing ourselves. All the games we're looking for, they have to be like very distinctive, innovative, and just clearly just very fun games to play. So we've been very lucky to find games that all fit those, all check off those boxes. People don't realize how big Bread and Fred is. I mean, it's at 350,000 sales, but like if you look on its Steam page, it's only like around, I think, 1,200 reviews. The game, what I've realized is that I guess casual games like Bread and Fred don't get nearly as many reviews as a ratio of how many games are bought as games like Turbo Overkill, where Turbo Overkill's got over 3,000 reviews, and it's actually sold less than Bread and Fred right now. But I guess the hardcore fan is much more likely to write a review. So anyway, we just got a great lineup of games, with Questmaster, Below the Stone, Lucid, and these other games I've mentioned. All of them are very different, but all of them are, when you play them, they're just very fun, very compelling, and there's something innovative about them that's going to make them stand out. And I really like the variety of games that we're making now. I stay involved with nearly all of our projects, at the gameplay level and so on, offering feedback daily. And it's just really fun to be able to hop around and be involved with such a variety of games, and these talented developers that we're working with. The indie space to me is the place to be, because I feel like in the indie space, this is where the innovation is happening in the industry. It's hard for the big companies that are doing the Call of Duties and so on to really be innovative, because they're putting so much money in their games. Taking a risk is really not in their best interest, because they might, you take the wrong move on a risk-taking maneuver, and you're going to lose, $50 to $100 million by your game not doing as well.
Now, some time ago, you decided to uncover just like many documents, emails, merchandise, and so much more from Apogee and 3D Realms' history from your storage, and of course, spread it around a bit on social media. Why so?
Because for one, it's fun. I knew that it'd be, it's something that I know our fans would be interested in seeing, because how many companies are doing this. I would love for other companies to do this, because as a fan of many other companies, I would love to see this stuff. Why doesn't id Software do this? Why doesn't Blizzard do this? Why doesn't Epic do this? This kind of stuff, looking back through your treasure chest of history, to me, it's just super fascinating. And for me, it's fun to do, because going through all the old files and stuff, I'm seeing stuff that I'd long forgotten about and going, oh, damn, that's right. So I take a picture of it, and next thing you know, I'm tweeting about it. But it also helps sort of reaffirm that it was Apogee all along. See, we created this 3D Realms label that, for branding purposes, for our 3D games like Duke Nukem 3D and Prey and Max Payne, and people think it was a separate company, but it was not. It was Apogee, and we just were using this 3D Realms label. Now 3D Realms is a separate company, and a lot of people think that that's the company that was involved with games like Prey and Max Payne and Duke 3D, but they were not. They had nothing to do with those games. So by releasing all this history to the world, it's sort of showing that, yes, it was us, Apogee, that is the true owner of this legacy and history. So that's another big part of it too. Is just sort of reclaiming our rightful history as the maker and developer and publisher of these classic games that people love.
You've also been pretty vocal on social media about 3D Realms. They're currently owned by Embracer Group. What do you think they are doing wrong, despite being in possession of such crucial IPs from gaming history?
One thing is that whenever a studio is bought by one of these mega corporations, especially a studio that's not that big like a 3D Realms and isn't really going to affect Embracer's bottom line that much, you're on a thin thread, and can be, pared down or released or cut or reabsorbed in some way, at a moment's notice when a company wants to just like reorganize. What I always say is that when you get bought by a big company, you're one big failure away from a total reorganization. And so one failure from a company like 3D Realms, like a Phantom Fury or a Tempest Rising, something that cost several $1 million to make, that's the opening that Embracer Group, people at Embracer Group will say, okay, we need to move our own management in there and take over and make sure that doesn't happen again. And at that point, it becomes really a different company. So it's just a big concern, and and this is not making stuff up. This is stuff we've seen for the last 25 years. When companies get bought like Westwood and so on, all these companies, Origin Systems, they when a company is bought like that, it rarely has a lifetime of longer than 10 years before it's like totally absorbed within the amoeba of the bigger company, and it just gets blurred out and erased from existence, and becomes another name that's forgotten to history.
Let's get talking about the future. So, what is next for Apogee? Aside from, of course, you mentioned about some of the projects in the pipeline, but what else can you say is currently up Apogee's sleeves at the moment?
With the successful games that we've already released and some that are coming out soon, we're planning like digital comics. We're planning ancillary music, and we really like the music side of making games. So we recently started our own little Apogee label for music. We plan on branching out and trying to do things like maybe a cartoon show or a Netflix show or something. So we're really concentrating on building like Bibles for our games with a whole suite of characters, kind of like I talked about with Prey. Really develop a lot of characters, each with their own role within the IP. We know that a lot of these streaming companies and channels, they're just desperate for new content, and we hope that if we can release a successful game, that puts us in the running for possibly pitching that idea to be a TV show or a cartoon show in some way. So we're trying to think big picture like that with a lot of our games that have been released or are coming to be released soon, and we have the right context in Hollywood and other places to really kind of open the doors for us and see if this can even happen. And so far, just testing the waters, it seems like it's a very real possibility that this sort of thing can happen. So we're definitely looking into that sort of thing. But our main focus will always be on games. We're always sort of beating the bushes at the indie level. There's thousands of indie games always in development, and we are definitely always looking for the gems among these, and by gems, I mean the ones that are going to be, really special when they're released, have something really unique about them. And so, we're always looking to sign new games, but yeah, we've also got like a full plate of games that are keeping us busy now. We're actually hiring a couple of new producers just to help manage all the projects we currently have. So right now, things with Apogee are just super fun. I look forward to every day. We've got great teams that are located around the world that we are constantly talking to every day. We have like a secret Discord where all of our projects are managed, and there's about 80 of us in there every day, discussing new ideas, new this and that for new games, looking at new art, listening to new music for coming games. So it's just a really, really, really fun sort of environment. We're fully work from home, and that's been working out great. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't be happier. I think Apogee's in a great, great place now.
Now, when you're not getting busy in the world of games, how do you personally like to relax and unwind?
Yeah, I'm actually a very active person too. Fitness and health is super important to me. So during the winter, I do a lot of snow skiing, hiking. I'm very much into mountain biking. Got a big mountain biking trip coming up at the end of this month, where I'm meeting with Mark Doctorman, who was like one of the original programmers on Rise of the Triad. He works for Google now. We're all meeting in Bentonville, Arkansas, in a couple of weeks to go on a 3-day mountain biking trip out there with a couple of us here from Apogee. I used to be in martial arts. I did that for 25 years. I've got a couple of different black belts, and still practice here at home sometimes. I love tennis, going to the gym, that kind of thing. So, and also, I've got a whole group of friends here in Dallas where we'll get together probably 4 or 5 dinners a week and just, business friends and stuff, just chat about everything we're working on, keep up with stuff, exchange ideas. Then we'll end up at one of our houses and we'll catch up like on the latest Marvel TV show or Star Wars TV show or, Star Trek TV show. We're into all that kind of nerd stuff, The Last of Us, House of Dragon, all that kind of stuff. We're all into that kind of stuff. So we love watching those shows together. So yeah, we like to hang out a lot too.
Scott, let me just say, it's been an absolute blast chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on board.
Now, it's been a really fun interview. So, it's been pleasure's all mine.
Anything that you'd like to say to the many, many fans of Apogee and 3D Realms?
I mean, not really. Just if you can, just follow our Apogee Twitter, and that's where we release, new news, new trailers, new this, new that, new history. It's all there, and if you follow that, you're going to get a lot of cool stuff coming your way.
And I'd personally like to thank my lovely listeners out there for once again tuning in to another amazing interview right here on the Cyberden. So, Scott, thank you very much, and best of luck with all of Apogee's future endeavors.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Jake.